Exactly 15 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. It's that time of the week where we bring you the latest regarding the G20. I'm Thami Ngubeni with Channel Africa, and joining me on the other side, although he's really on this side, is Ashraf Garda from the National Pulse on SFM. Good afternoon, Ashraf.
Thank you so much. Of course, one eye on G20, the other eye on, in terms of where I am in the Eastern Cape on the issues of the automotive industry. Somehow they all will be intertwined, I'm sure about that. Let's, however, talk about a big issue today. The Parliament of South Africa is hosting the G20 Parliamentary Speakers Summit, right? So the gathering of the speakers and the presiding officers from the group of 20 member countries, they're aimed at harnessing parliamentary diplomacy. It's a key word here, parliamentary diplomacy, for the realization of global solidarity, equality and sustainability, Thami.
Really key issues being discussed here. And at the opening of the summit, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Togo Didiza, called for collective leadership in tackling the aftershocks of the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't think the world has really completely recovered. We haven't yet come back to, pre-COVID settings. And some of the things that she addressed and she mentioned were issues of the rising conflict, of climate change, as well as the very troubling deepening inequalities that continue to perpetuate. And so for more on this afternoon, we're joined by the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Les Govender. Very good afternoon to you. Great to have you with us. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Thami and Ashraf. It's good to be on your program. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks, Les. Let me come in first. Just so we understand it. We know what G20 is. We've been talking about it for months, right? But what about the P20 summit? What are the objectives of the P20? Why does it exist?
All right. Firstly, just to explain the P20. The P20 is basically the speakers of parliaments. The speakers of parliaments that belong to the G20 nations. So whilst we have the G20 taking place later this year, as a run-up to that, you have the speakers of parliament that will meet, because it is the speakers that actually are the engine rooms in terms of what comes out of the G20 to ensure that this dialogue that takes place now will actually find expression as we move forward. So that is why the P20 meets first, so that they feed into the G20 that will take place later.
So when we look at the role of speakers and presiding officers, we know what role they play within their own parliaments, within their own countries, but on a more global scale, what oversight role can they play within the G20 to ensure that the priorities that are set out in the working group meetings are actually achieved?
Well, if you look at the various sub-themes that we were discussing over the past 2 days, those sub-themes affect countries across the world. For example, climate change knows no geographical boundaries. All countries are affected by climate change. So the coming together of all the speakers of the different parliaments of the G20 nations enables these countries to then discuss issues that they can collectively take forward, because no country can solve the climate issue on their own. It takes collective effort, and that is why it is so important that these different countries come together, put forward ideas, share information, and be able to discuss in an environment that enables countries to speak in one voice in terms of how we take forward these issues. Because remember that different countries face different challenges when it comes to climate change, because the more advanced countries are always seen to be the ones that are the ones that are causing climate change to move at a faster pace, while the poorer countries are the ones that are most affected. And the poorer populations are more affected, and they take later to recover. So that is why countries come together in this format to be able to discuss issues.
Okay, let me come in there. We've been talking about this for weeks on end, about the link between G20 and the impact that G20 would have on the African continent, the different countries that make up the African continent. So in the same vein, right, this issue of opportunities for African parliamentarians to align to their domestic legislative agendas with this broader and regional and global development priorities, and that will benefit everybody. But so that would be the premise. But how so? Tell me how will that benefit them?
Well, there's two things here we consider, Ashraf. Firstly, over centuries, Africa was seen as the supplier of raw materials, critical raw materials, materials that are taken out of Africa, processed somewhere else, and then sold back to Africa. So in these sessions, what came out very clearly is that needs to stop. Countries that are in the global north, that are benefiting from the critical raw materials from the African continent, need to now come and establish industries on the African continent so that we create jobs for our own people. We are able to manufacture on the African soil and then supply these manufactured goods to other parts of the world. That is the one issue. The other issue is with regard to the Africa Free Trade area, agreement that we have, where we need to ensure that African continent is able to trade amongst its various countries in a safe environment. Because what we find right now with the tariffs that are being imposed upon countries across the globe, we now need to look at the South-South, area agreements so that we can then take care of ourselves and also look at other trading partners, because we don't want to be held to ransom by one country that is imposing tariffs that are making it so difficult for other countries to sustain themselves. And those tariffs are going to have negative impacts on the smaller countries across the globe. So we are saying by these kind of coming together of different nations, we are able to look at alternate trading partners so that our economies are not adversely affected to such a great extent.
Les, I want to focus on something slightly different but related. We know that women and young people, in as much as they are represented in parliaments around the world, their representation is still uneven and really far below their share of the population in many of the countries. Now, alongside this P20 summit, there are two specific meetings that have been taking place. One is the P20 meeting of women parliamentarians, and the other is the P20 meeting of young parliamentarians. So these conferences are taking place simultaneously. Could you tell us how these two events are adding to the conversation of positioning Parliament as a key player in addressing global challenges, and why was it important to have these two subgroups?
For the first time, Thami, we've had a youth parliament, or if you want to call it the young parliamentarian session. On Monday and Tuesday this week, the young parliamentarians met and the women parliamentarians met. Now, as I was saying, it's for the very first time that we have young parliamentarians meeting. And the thinking behind it is that we need to ensure that the voices of the youth are heard at the level where decisions are being made. And, it is often said, nothing for us without us. And that is something that we have taken very seriously as South Africa. And we ensure that we bring together young parliamentarians. And as a run-up to the P20 sessions that we had, we held the youth parliament in Cape Town as well as the women's parliament, and then we brought all of those issues into the young parliamentarians sessions that was held on Monday and Tuesday, and the views of the South African parliamentarians were then shared with the international community. And I was so impressed by the inputs that were made by young parliamentarians, where they spoke their voices in an environment that enabled them to speak out and say exactly what is it that they want as they move forward. Because we are now engaged in a world where resources are being depleted to such an extent that these young parliamentarians are saying, what are you going to leave for us? And so that kind of dialogue came in very, very strongly. And then when we went into the women's session, that was also something where women across the world came together, and they spoke about issues of representativity, where they are not represented in the numbers that they really would like to see. But there was acknowledgement that there's been improvement over the years, where we now see more women occupying leadership roles in high levels of government, where decisions are being made on their behalf. So they are adding their voices to that. And as we close the session, the Speaker of our Parliament, the Honourable Didiza, said, there was a time when there was a glass ceiling, but now we have broken that glass ceiling. We have cleared up the glass pieces, and we have survived. So there is progress that is being made, and that came out very, very clearly in the two sessions that we held on Monday and Tuesday.
Okay, Les, that's where we're going to leave it. Appreciate your input. I think you certainly got us and the audience, listeners listening, lots to consider both on SFM and Channel Africa as part of this conversation. But the key part is this here, as for the last point, what about us? And I think the what about us is just such an important driver in terms of service delivery for leaders in South Africa and around the African continent when dealing with issues of G20, or in this case P20. So Les, Governor, much appreciate your time. The Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, thank you for your time. Thami, as always, appreciate you connecting with me as this partnership between SFM and Channel Africa. We'll do it again
next week.
Next
really
week.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Ashraf Garda and the Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Les Govender, as we continue focusing on the G20. November is literally just around the corner, and a lot of these summits are taking place in preparation for the main summit. Now, as far as women representation is concerned, only about 27% of women are represented in parliaments around the world. And this is per the parliamentary reports that have been put together. Only a few countries, the likes of Rwanda, Mexico, the UAE, Nicaragua and Cuba, have surpassed that 50% female representation. All of this coming out from the Interparliamentary Union IPU 2025 report. Brings us to exactly 28 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. This is Africa in Business. Still coming up for you today, we've got our very much anticipated C-Suite feature, where we're looking at the world of financial services. Our guest today is the former CEO of the Sanlam Group Risk, and she is currently the Chief Executive of Glue. She is Michelle Jennings.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.